Welcome to this traffic safety webinar sponsored by the North Carolina Governor's Highway Safety Program. This is one in a series of webinars addressing topics of interest for traffic safety professionals. The series is co-hosted by the Institute for Transportation Research and Education at NC State University. Today's topic is Be the Pebble, Changing Traffic Safety Culture in Our Organizations, Communities, and Relationships. Our presenter is Tracy Russ with ITRE. Tracy is the program manager for the Traffic Safety Marketing and Programs Group at ITRE. She specializes in behavior change development, qualitative research design, transportation safety research, and social marketing strategies. Tracy holds a master's degree in communication from North Carolina State University. Tracy, welcome. Please share your screen now to begin your presentation.
Thank you, Eugene, and thank you all for being here. Glad to have you a part of our webinar today. So we started out before the webinar officially started with a couple of questions for you to consider. We'll discuss these later, but I want you to think about the groups that you identify with. And if you could just write these down, you don't have to share them, we might discuss later. And then in those groups that you identify with, whether that's a bicycle club, Girl Scouts, PTA, whatever that might be, have you had any conversations about traffic safety within that group? And if you did, what did you talk about? This will kind of frame our conversation today about traffic safety culture. So I like to start out my presentation by saying that this topic represents one piece of the solution. When we talk about traffic safety culture, we're talking about efforts to improve decision-making and behavior of road users. So if you want to look at the graph here, it's that yellow slice of safer road users. And it's an important slice, but it's only one piece of the puzzle. As we all know, if we're going to get to zero traffic deaths, we need to build a safer roadway system that protects people when they make mistakes. This is called the safe systems approach. And it won't work without engineering solutions, such as designing safer roads and safer vehicles. So the presentation today will focus mainly on those behaviors, the causes of crashes that we have not yet figured out how to out-engineer. So we're talking about behavior. Traffic crash risk is influenced by both the physical environment, so the design of the roadway, the weather, roadway obstacles, things like that, and the social environment. The social environment, which includes our demographics, our institutions, things like that, fosters a local culture, which influences our behaviors on the road. So that's what we're going to discuss today, how our decisions are influenced by the values, beliefs, expectations, and attitudes that are shared by our communities or our social groups. Traffic safety culture is the shared belief system of a group of people which influences road user behaviors and stakeholder actions that impact traffic safety. I'll quote Nick Ward a lot in this presentation. He and colleagues at the Montana Center for Health and Safety Culture do a lot of great work in this space. So if you'd like to dive in more, I'd like to point you to their website. They also have resources and training specifically for organizations that want to improve culture. So we learn how to behave by watching important others. This is the social learning theory. So we watch our friends, our peers, parents, we watch TV, commercials, we watch other people on the road, and we're influenced by these perceptions and what we perceive to be normal or common behavior among others. So first, we're going to take a look at the current dominating norms in entertainment. So I'm going to play a clip here, and it does have sound. Okay, I think that's enough of that. What did we see in this clip? We saw speeding in an urban setting with people walking around. We saw the driver running a red light, driving on the wrong side of the road. Did anyone notice a seatbelt? Press the raise hand button if you saw a single seatbelt in that clip. I didn't see any. And all of these behaviors that we saw in this clip cause fatal crashes every single day in this country. Think about, how would you characterize the driver in this clip? Is he being depicted as the villain, as he's speeding around aggressively, dangerously driving? No, he's got sunglasses on. He's kind of got this cool persona going on. And this type of scene is extremely common. I had hundreds of clips to choose from on YouTube and actually had to be very deliberate to find one that didn't include a very serious crash scene. If you grew up in the US, this is very common. For most of your life, you've seen clips like this in movies and in advertising. You have been primed by all of this media to drive dangerously because they're showing it as this glamorous thing. It really does glorify dangerous, aggressive driving on TV, movies, advertisements. Like I said, here's some more examples. The Gentleman's Racer, kill bugs fast, lose your innocence in 3.9 seconds. It's a lot about speed in this advertising. And nearly every superhero movie or action movie has some kind of intense car chase scene. It's kind of like the cheat code for adding some cheap thrill to a plot. It's all overdone and it's always unrealistic. A 2005 study in the Journal of Public Health examined car and truck commercials that aired in the US and Canada between 1998 and 2002, and they found that nearly half of them included dangerous behavior, either aggressive driving or speeding. And we're affected by this normalization of aggressive, dangerous behavior. It's also interesting to note that some other countries don't allow this. For instance, the UK actually bans car ads which promote dangerous driving. Another more recent study looked at 333 driving scenes from 5 popular Netflix shows. So I don't know if you watch Bones or Homeland, Animal Kingdom, Vampire Diaries, Breaking Bad. Those are the ones they looked at. And of those scenes, they found that 81% of them showed at least one risky driving behavior. It was shocking to find that 74% of those driving scenes showed someone not wearing a seatbelt, and 11% of them showed some kind of distracted driving. So again, this is our entertainment, and we're very influenced by this. So before we get started talking about more about how to change culture, I asked you to think about the groups that you identify with. And our sense of culture is situated within this larger social environment. We're socially motivated to think and behave in ways that are consistent with the shared belief system of our groups. So for example, everyone in my family loves bird watching. My mom is a retired environmental educator who raised us to care about the environment and biodiversity. So of course, I also love birding, and my behavior is influenced by this shared value within my family of protecting the environment. So that's kind of my family bubble. And then if you go out a little bit further, we're looking at the workplace and the school environment. So we're influenced by the people that we work with, the policies that they have in place, and the interests of your colleagues. So let's say you work for DOT. If you work for a transportation organization like DOT or ITRE, you're interested in transportation. You're probably someone who values traffic safety, and so you spend time learning about it through webinars like this one. So today we're going to go into these spheres a little bit further: our families, our workplaces, the social groups that we're involved with. And as the title of the presentation suggests, my thesis is that as we make changes within these spheres, we can cause ripple effects, just like a pebble that's dropped into a pond, into these other spheres. So as we make changes within our families and our peer groups, we can change things within our communities, potentially our state, potentially our country. So we're very influenced by what our society and culture values and views as normal or attractive. Social norms say that a person is more likely to engage in dangerous behavior, like speeding, if he believes that it's socially acceptable or seen as attractive to speed. The same thing is true for the inverse. So if you think a lot of people in your group or a lot of people that you identify with think it's totally fine to text and drive, you're more likely to text and drive. If people in your bubble think that it's unacceptable to ride without a seatbelt, you're more likely to always buckle up. And we can see the power of these social expectations and how smoking culture has changed over the years. In 1965, 42% of US adults smoked. In the mid 1960s, it was common to see doctors, celebrities, athletes smoking on TV or advertising cigarette brands. Many of the cigarette companies were actually major sponsors of popular shows. But if you fast forward in 2021, 11% of adults smoke cigarettes in the US. So it went from 42% in 1965 to 11% in 2021. And part of this is the public perception of smoking that has changed over time. Smoking is a lot less acceptable socially. So it is possible to change or shape culture and norms and to see a change in behavior as a result. So before we go into the bubbles, I want to quickly talk about a couple of the behaviors that we're going to cover. The first one is distracted driving. I think I can safely say everyone on this call knows that texting and driving is dangerous. If you're behind the wheel and you're looking down and typing, your eyes aren't even on the road, that's very obviously risky. But I also want to focus on hands-free distraction because that seems to be a sticking point for some people. The basis of this is that our brains cannot do two cognitively demanding tasks at the same time. Driving is very clearly a cognitively demanding task. It requires a lot of our attention, lots of moving pieces all at once. Having a conversation is also a cognitively demanding task. So if we're trying to do those two things at the same time, our brain is actually toggling very quickly between the two tasks. I'm driving, I'm talking, I'm driving, I'm talking very quickly. You cannot focus fully on both. And when this happens, we miss things. In fact, a driver that's talking on a hands-free device, like think about using a Bluetooth in your car, you can miss up to half of your surroundings. You develop sort of a tunnel vision if you're talking on the phone while driving, even if your hands are on the wheel. So pop quiz. If you look on Zoom, you should see a reactions button. I'm pretty sure you have, let's see. Well, if you have it there, or you can just think of your answer. Which is more dangerous, A, B, or C? Okay, I do see a party popper. So if you want to vote A, talking to a passenger while driving is more dangerous, put a thumbs up. If you say B, talking on the phone while driving is more dangerous, then put a red heart. Or if you think they're equally dangerous, put that party popper. Okay, so hopefully you've had a chance to think about it. The answer is B. Our red hearts got it. It is more dangerous to talk on the phone while you're driving than it is to talk to a passenger. Why is that? Let's think about a scenario, okay? Talking to a passenger while you're driving, it is distracting, yes, right. But it's less dangerous than talking on the phone. Because if you think about it, if I'm driving, you're in the car with me, we're talking, and someone in front of our vehicle suddenly slams on the brakes, what usually happens? More than likely you, the passenger, will go, oh, or you'll say, watch out, or like, oh, or you'll stop talking. You will typically either alert me to the situation or react with me to that situation. But when you're on the phone talking to someone who's not in the vehicle, they have no idea what's going on. They don't know that someone just slammed on their brakes. They're going to continue to talk, which draws your attention away when something suddenly changes. So I just wanted to go over this quick point because we will be talking about distracted driving policies, and I want to make sure that we're understanding that we're not just talking about texting while driving, we're talking about touching your phone, using your phone, taking your attention away from driving at all. Okay. I want to play a video. JC Good, who you will see here, is one of my reasons when I'm behind the wheel that I'm very strict about not touching my phone or using my phone behind the wheel. And I'm hoping that her story may help you as well.
So I just confess that I text and drive. If I get a text, I look at my phone.
It's definitely texting.
Instagram, Twitter, Facebook.
Snapchat. I do Snapchat and drive sometimes.
Is that like making Snapchats or watching them?
Making them.
Texting is like my main form of communication.
Boredom, honestly.
And B, well, no, I guess no, it's really just A.
I've only never done it at stoplights. I've always been really good about it.
The passenger has a pretty important role driving now, where they're like, oh, red light, red light.
If someone that you like texts you, you're like, you can't just like let it sit there without just knowing what they said.
Because what if something exciting's happening or something happened?
Like, every time I do it, I think about, I'm like, why am I doing this? And then I just keep doing it.
So I'd like to, want to introduce you to a friend of ours.
My name's Tracy.
Hi, Alexis.
Hi, Dash.
Justin, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. I just really quickly want to have a chat, tell you what happened to me. When I was 21 years old, driving home from my college graduation ceremony, driver on his phone was so distracted, he turned left into the intersection at a red light. Another car, an 18-wheeler, swerved to miss him and hit my family's car. And the resulting collision actually killed both of my parents. I spent 2 months in the hospital fighting for my own life, and then 2 more months in a rehab hospital, learning how to walk again, learning how to speak again, learning how to dress myself and how to feed myself. I live with a partially paralyzed body. I didn't have my daddy to walk me down the aisle when I got married.
Having sort of met JC, because you look at JC and sort of give those same reasons.
Usually I use my phone to change a song on. I try to use it as little as possible, but
I'm not gonna look at my phone ever again.
Honestly, if I have been sitting at a red light, I'll glance down to see if my mom's texting me, but the people's lives that are impacted from something that is so stupid.
I can assure you on my drive home right now, I'm not going to use my phone and drive, and I'm not going to do it when I go to work tomorrow and the next day after that until, it becomes a habit, and that just doesn't happen at all.
I know this is hard, I'm sorry, it's hard for me too, but this is real. You have the power to really actually make a difference and do something about it.
Thank you.
Okay, so it's a powerful video, and I play this to drive home our point here about distracted driving and phone use, but also because this is the moral basis of what we're talking about today, and the reasons for changing this culture, the reasons for policies in the workplace and conversations with our peer groups and our family and friends is that we're not talking about statistics, we're talking about people and real stories. So I hope that you keep JC in mind and help to spread her story. We're also going to talk about speeding in this presentation. Speeding is directly tied to the severity of a crash. And this is especially important in areas where there are people walking or rolling, riding bicycles. Very small differences in speed can be the difference between life and death in crashes involving people walking or biking. So as the graph shows, a person who's hit from a driver traveling at 20 miles an hour has a 90% chance of surviving. But let's say you're in a 25-mile-an-hour zone, maybe think about the neighborhood streets that you go down. If you're going 5 mile an hour over the speed limit, so you're traveling at 30 miles an hour, and you hit someone, they have a 50% chance of dying. So again, these are relatively small differences in speed that make a really big difference. So when we're talking about policies about speeding, we're not just talking about going 70 and a 55 on the highway. We're talking about when you're on the urban streets and you're thinking about going a little bit over, that really can have a big difference. So here's another video that again emphasizes the difference in speed can have a big difference in the severity
What
of the
you're about to
crash.
see will change your mind about speeding. Two identical cars, one travelling at 60, the other at 65. A sudden change in the road ahead, and both drivers first react, and then, a moment later, they brake. And things start to get interesting. Down here, the difference is extraordinary. In the last 5 metres of braking, you wipe off half your speed. So this car is still doing 32 k's when it hits. This one also hits, but only at 5 k's. So no matter how good a driver you are, 5 k's difference up there makes 27 k's difference down here.
Tracy, sorry, you're muted.
Thank you, Eugene. So the difference in travel speed between those two cars was 5 kilometers per hour, which is only a little over 3 miles per hour. So again, such a small difference in speed, and you could see the difference between those two crashes. Okay, so let's get back to our social environment. The first bubble that we're going to talk about is individual. Everything that we do on the road sets a precedent for what is expected and accepted in our communities. A good example of this is when drivers yield to people at crosswalks. Sometimes I've had to wait quite a long time at a pedestrian crossing, think about 4 lanes of traffic. But usually what happens is once one driver notices that I'm there waiting to cross, they'll stop, and then suddenly other drivers will say, oh, okay, there's someone trying to cross, and they'll also stop. So it can kind of be this chain reaction. Even when we're traveling completely alone, every decision is like casting a vote for the level of safety that you want to see on the road. Sometimes it doesn't feel like it. I tend to notice those aggressive drivers because they're whizzing through. But really, most people in North Carolina are safe. So it's really up to us to speak up when someone is unsafe. And it's important to acknowledge that this is really difficult. This is hard. It's awkward. Depending on the circumstance, it can be very difficult. My favorite story to tell about this is when I took an Uber from the airport years ago to the Lifesavers conference. Lifesavers is one of the biggest traffic safety conferences in the country. I was sharing an Uber with 2 law enforcement officers and another traffic safety colleague. And our Uber driver, as soon as he picked us up, he was texting on his phone and speeding on the highway. It was very scary. And there was this awkward couple of moments where I was kind of waiting on one of the officers to say something, or maybe my colleague, but no one said anything. We were all clearly uncomfortable, but no one said anything. Of course, if you know me, I did end up saying something. I had to collect some guts, but I did ask him to put his phone down and slow down. I reported the driver to Uber, But it just goes to show that even highly trained professionals, people who are paid to pull people over, can still have a hard time in these situations. The key here is to practice. We'll talk about this more in a minute, but think about different situations and maybe even talk with people you know about what you can say if someone is being dangerous, if they're driving dangerous. This is also really important online, on social media. If you see a post online that was clearly filmed behind the wheel or a video that shows something unsafe on the road, it's important to say something in the comments, or as the graphic shows, downvote it. Publicly show that you do not support what you're seeing posted, and this can catch on. You don't want people to earn social clout, whether that's likes or followers, if they're risking other people's lives. And it's important to know that you can also report dangerous behavior, dangerous driving through most of the apps, including TikTok, Facebook, Instagram. So I mentioned before practicing speaking up. You're more likely to say something in a situation where you feel unsafe if you have experience in your pocket, or if you have a phrase or two that you can go to. So we developed a program for teens that were in driver's ed to help them with this type of scenario. To empower passengers to speak up, we developed this acronym to help them remember things they can say. So the acronym is PEACH. If you feel unsafe because of a dangerous driver, speak up, be a peach. And each of the letters of PEACH can help them remember something they can say. So you can mention the police. You can say, you know, I've seen a lot of cops out today. You might want to slow down. I think they're pulling people over. You can speak from experience. I was hit by a distracted driver a couple years ago. It was really scary. Can you put your phone down? Be very clear, you know, I'm uncomfortable, you know, please put your seatbelt on, or offer to help, be helpful. Here, let me do the maps for you, or I'll change the music. So the key here is to prepare ahead of time. Think of something you can say so that if you are in a situation as a passenger, you don't hesitate to speak up. We can also set an example by the language that we use and the way that we talk about travel. So if I call someone and they're driving, I politely but promptly say, call me back when you arrive, and then I hang up. Even if they insist, no, I can talk, it's fine. This is a personal boundary that I've set to respect people like JC, who have been personally affected by crashes involving distracted driver. So as much as possible, we want to reference traffic safety to our friends, our family, our colleagues. The intent here is to set and keep this boundary, to keep those that we care about safe, keep yourself safe, and hopefully send out a little bit of a ripple out into your bubble. So here's an example on the screen. It's an email signature image. I have this in my email. I get comments all the time. It's a great conversation starter, but it's also just a way to put out there, you know, this is a priority for me, and just remind people that it's not okay to be on your phone while you're behind the wheel. So we have versions of this signature on the NC Vision Zero website, free to download if you'd like to use one of those. My voicemail message also references the fact that I will not answer the phone if I'm driving, but if there's an emergency, to call twice in a row, and I'll find a place to pull over. So as this graphic shows, if you need me to know, call me twice in a row. And I have to give credit here to my colleague, Daniel Finley. This was his idea. He told me about this method, and it's worked great for my family. They don't hesitate to call me, and then if I don't pick up, they know that I'll call them later, or if it's an emergency, we have a way to do it safely by pulling over and calling them back. The same principle applies though when I need to contact someone. I will not call or text if I know someone is driving. This is especially important if you know someone, you probably know someone who doesn't always fight the temptation to answer. So it's just very important that, you know, we're also being proactive, keeping people safe, by not trying to contact them while they're driving. Okay, so next we're going to talk about how to encourage traffic safety culture in our families. I've got another video. I love this video. It's very clear. The message here are our kids observe and they absorb our driving habits from a very young age. So I'm going to go through 4 things that we can do to raise traffic safe kids, excuse me, and cultivate traffic safety culture within our families. We developed this program as part of a Safe Routes to School project. It's called the SEP method, which stands for Show, Explain, Practice. So the first thing is to show what safety looks like. The best way to do this is to be a role model when you're traveling. You've probably heard the phrase that kids start learning how to drive the moment you turn their car seat facing front. So even if your kids won't be driving for another decade, they're already taking driving lessons every time they're in a vehicle, especially with parents or important others. More than likely, the way that you drive now is the way they will drive in the future, just like we saw in that video. Many of you probably have visited Safety City at the North Carolina State Fair, hosted by the Governor's Highway Safety Program. Years ago, we hosted a NC Vision Zero booth there, and I talked to a lot of kids about traffic safety, and I would ask them questions like, okay, what would you do if a driver picks up their phone behind the wheel? And so many of them would turn to mom or turn to dad or auntie and tell on them. They would say, oh, she does that, or, you know, dad does that. And of course, it's kind of funny, kind of embarrassing, of course, for the parents, but it opened up really great conversations. And the point here is that kids pick up on these things, you know, even if, again, they're very young, they notice what we do and it can influence their travel habits in the future. We really can't wait until they're 15 and going to driver's ed to suddenly say, oh, don't use your phone, or, you know, make sure you buckle up, when they've had, you know, 15 years of enforcement based on what they saw you doing. So saw me doing, saw us doing. Okay, so they follow our example, not our advice. The second thing is to explain. The leading cause of teen driver crashes, or one of the leading causes of teen driver crashes, is inexperience. It really just takes time learning how to drive. It's important that we use practical driving experience when we're talking with our kids and explaining what's going on. And one of the best ways to do that is to explain your thought process as you travel. So for example, if you're in the vehicle, when I'm driving, I try to watch at least 3 cars ahead. And so then if they start braking, I know that I need to brake soon. Or, you know, if you're driving, oh, look, there's a person that's trying to cross. So I'm going to stop and I'm going to wave so that they know it's safe to go. These are things that are likely happening automatically within your thought process. But when we say it out loud, we're reinforcing exactly everything that we're thinking about, why we're thinking about it that way. And that helps kids to develop those same thought patterns. So for example, when I learned how to drive, one thing my dad taught me was always have a way out. By that, he meant, don't drive in between two other cars, or, always have a way to leave a situation if something goes wrong. And this little nugget of advice still echoes in my head today, anytime I'm behind the wheel. So these things really do stick with kids and can help to save their lives. Okay, lastly, it's important to practice with your family. For kids, that might mean practicing crossing the road safely, practicing listening for cars or looking both ways, riding a bike near traffic or on a greenway. Play out circumstances that they might encounter and ask them what they would do. For teens, it's important to have supervised practice in a variety of environments. So like this graphic says, you want to mix it up. You want to have some rural driving, some driving in the rain, on the highway, at night. Really practice all those different situations so they know how to handle it. No matter what your family looks like, you set an example for them by how you walk, how you bike, how you drive, or how you ride. So it's important to make a commitment as a family or a unit to be safe and to keep each other safe and accountable on the road. So one way to do this is through a traffic safety, family traffic safety contract. Here's an example. This is on our website. You can print this out and personalize it for your family. We start with reasons. Why is it important to be safe? Because we care about each other, because we want to see each other arrive safely at home. And then there's different promises for the grown-ups and the kids for a variety of situations. This is, again, a great conversation starter. And then you can always come back to it and say, okay, well, if the kids notice the grown-ups weren't keeping up to their promises, how do they approach you? How can they start that conversation? It has to be a mutual respect for each other to keep this commitment. So that's available on the website, and we'll send out these links after the webinar. Okay, so the last bubble we'll talk about is the workplace. Sad statistic, but in the US, we spend about 1/3 of our lives at work. So it makes sense that we develop habits from our workplaces, but it's also a great opportunity for organizations to infuse your team with traffic safety culture. And you don't have to be like a fleet company. You don't have to be an organization that's constantly behind the wheel for this to be true. To set traffic safety cultural norms, again, we have to keep talking about it. This can be done both formally and informally, but if you want your organization to set safety as a priority, right, that Vision Zero goal, it has to be part of your procedures in order to become habit. So for example, if you're putting together a meeting invite, you might consider adding a note to the agenda or to the calendar invite, the Zoom invite, Teams invite, whatever that is. As part of an effort to keep North Carolina roads safe, we ask that you don't call into the meeting while driving. We talked about this before, so distracted driving, even listening into that meeting can be distracting. So, if this is a priority for your organization, put it very clearly, very publicly on anything related to that meeting. Or you might say, during your meeting, we value your safety more than your punctuality. So if you're running late, we would rather have you arrive safely than arrive on time. Please don't speed. During meetings, you can also remind people of these boundaries. So if someone arrives late, usually they come in and they say, oh, I'm sorry, I'm late, traffic or whatever. And you can respond again publicly saying, we're just glad you made it here safely. That's more important. It has to be very visible, committing, prioritizing safety. At the beginning of your Zoom call, you might say something like, we want to thank everyone for joining us today and remind you that in an effort to keep our roads safe, we ask that you don't call into this meeting while driving. This prioritization of safety should be very obvious, very external to any clients or partners that you're working with. And this is where we can serve as that example to organizations. This is where we're trying to serve as that pebble in the pond. So this is about a visible and regular commitment to traffic safety. So some things to think about. If members of your team are traveling, if that's to a conference or to a meeting or an event, how is travel discussed? In my experience, I fill out a reimbursement form. I get approved for mileage and food. Does anyone talk about what is expected of your employees on the road? Are there policies? How are we being reminded of those policies? Are there reminders about refraining from phone use or following the speed limit? And you may be thinking that for many of our teams, it may be preaching to the choir, right? So many of us that work in transportation or traffic safety, we live these statistics. Like we know them all too well. We remember the faces of the families that we worked with or that we've read about. The nature of our work really makes us cognizant drivers and hopefully safer drivers. But these external commitments and these external reminders are these public signals of our priorities. We have to keep talking about it and keep centering our work on safety to cause those ripples out into our communities. So think about what would that visible commitment look like for your organization at all levels? How can you include regular organizational level communication about safety? One idea that I wrote up here, we have a monthly newsletter through email that's called the Traffic Safety Advocate. One of the things we'll be including in the future is a traffic safety tidbit. So this would be a short fact and a suggestion that you can share with your staff that's related to traffic safety, hopefully a conversation starter. So is there a way to include that or include some kind of traffic safety topic at every single staff meeting? Can you prioritize safety by sending more staff to training, to conferences and webinars that focus on road safety? You may have more ideas. I'd love to hear those. So if you can include those in the chat or Q&A, if you know of other policies or procedures that you do with your staff. All right, one quick plug before we close out. The first step to changing culture in many cases is measuring culture. We got to know where we're at. What do people believe? What do people value before we can change it or before we can use those pro-social norms for campaigns? Many of our communities have those positive social norms. Most people do buckle up. Most people don't drink and drive. Most people wear a seatbelt. But our community members might be overestimating that dangerous behavior. So to correct that, it's important to know where we're at. My team just started a new project with the town of Apex and Apex Vision Zero to measure traffic safety culture in their town and then develop campaigns based on our findings. So this is a new effort, but if you're interested in hosting a similar study in your area, please reach out. This is something we're hoping to do in more places across the state. Okay, so my primary message with this presentation is that we are highly influenced by our social circles, the bubbles that I've been talking about, the people we are around the most, the people that we love or we look up to. This is where we have the most power as well to potentially save lives by helping to shape a culture that values safety over all else. So it has to be a deliberate mission, but I do believe we can do it. I'm leaving you here with a quote from Robert Kennedy. Each time a man or woman stands up for an ideal or acts to improve the lot of others or strikes out against injustice, he sends forth a tiny ripple of hope, and crossing each other from a million different centers of energy and daring, those ripples build a current that sweep down the mightiest walls of oppression and resistance. So I encourage you to be the pebble that starts that ripple effect in your social spheres. Your actions and your conversations can be so powerful. Okay, so we have time for questions, I think. I want to thank you all for your time. I've included the 2 discussion questions on the left here, so if we have time to go through those, I'd love to hear what you all have to say, your experience with conversations in your organizations. But that is all I have for now. So Eugene, do we have any questions?
Tracy, yes. Thank you very much for the presentation. A couple of comments so far in Q&A. We'll start with those. First of all, reaction to the JC video. Says a very powerful video. Can you share the link?
Absolutely. I will send all the links I used in our follow-up email that Eugene typically sends out. So you can look for that in your email.
Thank you, Tracy. And the next comment, I think this is in reference to the graphic you showed about pedestrians, survivability of pedestrians at different speeds. The comment is, I've seen this graphic with speed and survivability, but I read that it's dated and it was based on smaller, lighter cars. Are those numbers worse now with bigger, heavier automobiles?
That is a great question. My assumption is yes, unfortunately. And I'm sure you have the same mental picture I do of that like big, tall truck, right? And that little kid standing in front of it. You know, the odds are just terrible. So my assumption is yes, but that's a good question that I don't have the answer to. So I will look for that. And then if I can find something related, I will also include that in the follow-up email.
Okay, thank you, Tracy, on that. I had a couple of questions that I wanted to make sure we addressed. How can someone start cultivating traffic safety culture in their organization if they haven't done anything like this before?
Okay, so my first recommendation is volunteer, right? Because if you go to leadership and you say, we need to do this thing, it's a little bit harder to put something on someone else's plate. So volunteer to take those small steps. Volunteer to share a traffic safety minute or a traffic safety tidbit at each staff meeting. Volunteer to print off some of the traffic safety materials that you've seen today. Post them around the office. We have some around ITRE's office. I've seen them posted in bathrooms. It's just to kind of show, okay, the staff here thinks about this. You can also deliberately discuss safety anytime you hear one of your colleagues talking about travel. Potentially ask your leadership if you can start a few safe driving policies. It kind of depends on what kind of structure you're a part of. Maybe more difficult if you're at a large university like we are. But there may be ways to remind your teammates of policies or expectations. And then I would also encourage you to talk to your colleagues. Unfortunately, it's pretty likely that someone you work with has been personally impacted by a crash. So giving people a safe space to share their experiences can be a great place to start. Like we talked about, that is the moral foundation of this. These are real people, real stories. These are families. These are crashes that have had rippling effects in our communities. So if that's where the conversation starts, it should kind of help build momentum for the why we should work on cultivating that culture in the workplace. So yeah, you may have other ideas, but start small. And I think part of it is just starting those conversations.
Thank you, Tracy. And looking back at the family bubble, what are some ways that you haven't already touched on that you can encourage a family member to drive more safely?
Yes, that's hard. So I relate to that because I have a adored close family member who drives a bit too aggressively for my comfort. And you know, over the years, I've tried different things. What has worked best for me is trying to explain how I feel, you know, those I statements instead of the you are doing, you know, you are speeding, you are doing this. It's I feel scared or I'm really anxious. Can you please slow down? Or I'm feeling uncomfortable. Starting there. And then also kind of widening the conversation. I think it's very natural to become defensive when we're confronted about our behavior. That's very natural. So rather than starting there, maybe just opening up that family conversation, the family commitment. You can just say, you know what, at work, we've been talking a lot about crashes, and I just really want to make sure we as a family are being safe. So let's all start here. Let's do the contract, or let's just talk about how we can be safer, how we can be accountable with each other. A lot of that is open-ended questions. So asking people when they get back from work or something, you know, what was the most challenging part of being on the road? What is something that you did to stay safe and you're really glad you did that? Or was there anything that you could have done differently? And then lastly, there are some pretty cool apps out there about driving accountability. I think a lot of them are targeted more for teen drivers and parents, but they could really work for any kind of family group. So basically the apps can track the speed limit of the area you're in, and then if you're traveling more than that speed limit, or if you start using your phone while driving, it can send alerts to the parent phone or the family members. So there's different ways to do it, but you know, if it starts with, we as a family will promise to do these things so that we all are safe, and then there's some kind of, if you want to use the app to stay accountable, make it a contest, something like that. That's one way to start.
Thank you, Tracy. Let's get time for one more question in here from the Q&A. The question is, has any research been done on transportation agency culture? For instance, why do agencies continue to use the 85th percentile speed limit setting method when injury minimization methods perform better for safety?
Yes, I agree with you. I don't know of specific studies. I do think there is a gap between maybe some Vision Zero commitments and the teeth behind those commitments, right? And I can't really speak to the top-down solution. I can only speak to things that we can do to kind of start it at our level. So our bubbles where we can start to hopefully start that ripple. I think that's a valid concern, and I don't know the answer to that. If anyone else would like to comment, feel free to add it. But you know, I agree with you. If we have this statewide Vision Zero commitment, are we sticking to that commitment through our funding of projects? And I think right now we're not.
Okay, Tracy, thank you. Yes, and feel free if, as Tracy invited you, if anyone else has comments on that, you can actually add comments to that question in the Q&A. Well, we are close to our time here, Tracy. So I'm going to go ahead and thank you again for a great presentation. I'm going to go ahead and switch back over to my slides now to close us out. So again, we appreciate everyone joining us today. And if we were unable to answer your questions, we're going to leave Q&A open here a bit longer. So go ahead and add any additional questions to Q&A, and we'll try to get an answer from those offline following the webinar. And also feel free to share any suggestions or ideas for future webinar topics that you would like to see us present coming up. Just add those ideas in Q&A as well. As I mentioned a little bit earlier, watch for a follow-up email after today's webinar. It'll have a recording link. It'll have some links to some of the videos and resources that Tracy shared. We'll also be posting a PDF of Tracy's slides. You may have noticed Tracy actually listed a whole lot of links or URLs in her slides on actually on the slide. So those will be embedded into the PDFs. So and if there's a link that's missing, just reach out to Tracy. You'll have her contact and email in the follow-up message. So just reach out to her. She'll be happy to provide you with any additional resources that she has for you. If you would like a certificate for participating in today's live webinar, there'll be a link again in that follow-up email for you to request that certificate. It's a to, it's a brief survey, just says type in the name as you want it to appear on your certificate and give us your email address, and we'll be happy to send you a PDF certificate that is suitable for printing. If you are watching this recording of the live webinar, not this live webinar, unfortunately, we cannot provide certificates just for watching the recording. But if you are a participant in the live webinar and would like a certificate, just follow the link in the follow-up email. And if you are a professional engineer, if you're a PE, you can get 1 PDH credit for attending this webinar. There'll be a link you'll probably want to request a certificate for documentation. There'll also be a link to NC Bells, if you're familiar with that, to an NC Bells evaluation that you can fill out as well to document your participation for your PE credits. So if you'd like to see more webinars in the future, or if you'd like to see recordings of past webinars, please go to the Traffic Safety Conference website, which is at this URL. Look for the listing for training and webinars, and that's where you'll find the link to today's recording, as well as our recordings of our past webinars. You'll also find information about the next upcoming Traffic Safety Conference. We hope you all will plan to attend that. And actually registration for that conference will be opening very soon. So watch for information on the website as well as emails going out. That's all for today. So again, on behalf of the Governor's Highway Safety Program and ITRE, I want to thank you very much for participating, and have a great day and a safe day when you're driving. Take care.